We always say it was a war of brother against brother, but nothing that I've ever seen has captured it quite like this. Missouri, a border state without a defined Confederate government, therefore no official Confederate army, therefore pro-Confederate forces are bushwhackers, they're outlaws, it's espionage, it's what we would call terrorism, immediate execution, no uniforms, no trials, no ranks. This is the stuff that, well, it overlaps with some of the great Westerns of our time, including the outlaw Josie Wales. We get the whole Bloody Bill sort of phenomenon in it. Tobey Maguire, the pop singer and actress Jewel, Jim Caviezel, a host of others, 1999's Ride with the Devil. Tobey Maguire plays in Ride with the Devil a figure who is a German American. He is being raised here, but he is of German ancestry. His parents arrived from Germany, and as they mention at the beginning of the film, like all the Germans, at least in that area, they were going to be officially neutral during the war. They hadn't been here very long. The Civil War broke out. They didn't really want to take a position, and they were in a border state, so neutrality was more of a possibility. But not for Tobey Maguire's character. He has lived here long enough. He has been here, that this is his home. These people are his kin. He identifies with the pro-Confederate forces. He is more than willing to join up with them and commit acts of disobedience, violence, and war against the Union government. War is ugly, and the Civil War was ugly, and this is one of the ugliest sort of fronts in the war. When people literally would go down the street, you'd ride to the other side of your small town, and you would burn out the home and farm of your neighbor right over there because they were pro-Yankee or because they were pro-Confederate, they were rebs. People spied on one another, turned each other into the other one's faction as people that were spying for one or the other and participating in some such, and the brutality would go on. This is war that is not from a long distance. You are not shooting people across a battlefield. It is deeply personal in a community, within an area where you know each other, know of each other, and you're literally burning out, sacking, destroying, and shooting, gunning down, and hanging and lynching your own neighbors in a very literal sense. This escalates throughout the course of the film as Tobey Maguire joins up with his group fighting against the Union forces, and the Union gets increasingly nasty, or pro-Union forces. And as this escalates, so finally they round up all the pro-Confederates in the area, and they go and they massacre a whole Union town. This is an infamous and famous series of bloody massacres that occur in the border states during this time. And this leaves Tobey Maguire with an odd sense of, what are we doing here? Because he did not want to go that far with random civilians, random people, and it really drives home the nastiness of the Civil War, the very uncivil Civil War. One of the really nice things, however, is we get the character of Daniel Holt, who is a freed slave that used to belong to Skeet Ulrich's character. They are actually really good friends, and Holt fights for the Confederate forces in the border states. Despite the way movies like to depict this era, things are not very simple anywhere in this sort of complicated maelstrom of cultures and personalities, of families and kin. And of course, Black Americans fought on both sides of the Civil War in a variety of capacities and to varying levels of the involvement or devotion. We do get this character in the movie, and he is treated as an equal, and he is treated with respect, as often happened in the Confederate Army. One of the bizarre things that is often left out of so many of these Yankee sort of Northern paradigm movies is that at a time when the Union was very segregated to the degree that they even allowed Black troops to be under arms, throughout the Confederate states, the Confederate Army, you had a great deal of integration, of people that were a very peculiar sort of mixed race or clearly black. But if you showed up and you were willing to fight for the South, there was sort of no questions asked. And so the bizarre conundrum of an army allegedly fighting for someone's freedom but segregates them within, and the army that allegedly is fighting for their oppression has them completely integrated in, and they are friends, they are brothers, they are fellow combatants, fellow soldiers of the South. The film captures that really nicely, as well as the conflict overall with Southern and Northern culture. Now, this is huge. What really makes Ride with the Devil a fabulous film. There's all that great, there's that moral tension, there's the moral questions, there's all of this stuff is significant. But what I felt like it really did well was capture the greater worldview problem. Because again, we live in a time where very sympathetic with the North historically. People make all of these films and it's always a very simple thing. Slavery bad, so the people against it are good. There's a lot more nuance to that of questions over federal government power, federal intrusion into your lives, big government versus small government, taxation, and other things that have been happening to the southern states for a long time in this sort of unequitable way, to use the parlance that has been co-opted by our time. There's so many other factors involved, and so there is with Black Americans, whether in the North or in the South, whether fighting for the Union or for the Confederacy, but the big drastic conflict between big government and small government plays into this because of the cultural difference that had developed from the industrialized North with this very English sort of view to the not so industrialized agrarian South, which held on to more traditional sort of Scottish, sort of Irish, sort of French ideas of the plantation life and independent sovereignty. It's a lot more like serf culture of the medieval period has not disappeared there, where in the North, industrial culture has replaced it. And of course, the treatment and lifestyle of workers in this industrial machine is in so many ways worse than the slavery of the new serfs who serve the estates and manors and lords and ladies in the South. And yet culturally, these two worlds are colliding because one views the other as evil. This gets highlighted in the film Ride with the Devil when they are holed up with pro-Confederate forces, and the pro-Confederate family expresses the fear, the father, that, inevitably we're going to lose. And he tells the story about Kansas and the Union occupation and how pro-Union, anti-slavery people moving in there to Kansas went out of their way to move to town, build a school, and round up every kid in the area and take them to the school. Those of us living today understand the concerns about public schools and what's being taught in public schools. We forget that the idea of mass education itself was controversial for the very reason that rounding up people together and teaching them the same stuff is an incredible ability to control them when you can control what they're being taught. And ultimately, the message that comes out of this in Ride with the Devil is that in the end, the Union is going to win one way or the other, because those people in the North are obsessed with the idea that only their worldview is correct. They believe that they need to go down there and change the way of life of the Confederate South. They need to change those people's view of the world, change those institutions. Conversely, the cause of the Confederacy is isolation. All they ever wanted was to be left alone. They wanted to continue their life the way their life had been. They wanted to make their own decisions. Man, if this conflict doesn't sound familiar, you ain't watched the news in my lifetime, because this is still ongoing. It is a constant tension, particularly in the West, Western Europe, and particularly in America, this idea of principles and values. Do we believe in small government, that people make their own decisions? Or do we think that government must educate from the top down, By running a public education system, everyone gets the same perspective, the same beliefs, the same ideas out of the same books, however bad they are. The whole message of the Confederacy was go away and leave us alone. Let us figure this out. It is not even pro-slavery. So few of them own slaves. So few of them are clearly known to have been supporters of slavery. It was supporting independence and sovereignty. That some Yankee in the North in Washington, D.C. is going to decide the curriculum at a school that my kid will go to. That those people up there will decide what to tax my crops between here and the coast when I'm sending them overseas for sale. Someone up there, like the idea of small government versus big government, it sounds simplistic, but this touches every aspect of the Civil War conflict in America. Who is regulating? Who is making the decisions? Where does the power go lopsided? Is it up there or is it down here with the little guy? The convenient issue of slavery, it is a convenient issue that gives a alleged moral compass to these forces in the North to go down to the South and change their way of life. But it's a way to focus on one thing that you feel you can play in the media, the press, your speeches. You can sell that so that when you get there and abolish slavery and have no plan of what to do with the slaves after, no plan to actually integrate them into society, stick them with 40 acres and a mule, complete with carpetbaggers following you along to scam them out of it. Once you have crushed this old structure completely with nothing to put in its place, but it doesn't matter because you were able to push that one issue to make it a moral and righteous cause. And in the end, we're left with this tragedy in the film Ride with the Devil, where they see everything that they have fought for and worked for and struggled for drying up before them because of the brutality of the North. Because you can't get enough collective action, you can't get enough collective unity, enough collective money, a draft. You can't get that out of a culture based on leave us alone. But any culture based on tyranny, that we will all do the same and you must and you will comply and you have to and we will mandate, they will always overpower the culture of freedom when it comes to conflict. This is the sad truth, because the people that just want to be left alone will always be victimized, even by a small minority of those that refuse to share the planet with them, because they will give everything. These are the people that strap bombs to themselves and plant bombs in schools and poison wells. And these are the people that will do anything because they believe their cause is inevitably global, cosmic, universal, and just. The people that just want to be left alone just want to keep moving away from you and just don't want it. They don't want the hassle. And so in the end, they're always much easier victims of a tyranny. But there is a happy ending, at least, within the film Ride with the Devil. We get the happy ending of Tobey Maguire ends up with Jewel, who was not his girlfriend. She is pregnant by his late friend, not by him. But this whole Southern culture thing, it's assumed that the baby is his, and there's all this pressure then that he should marry her because it ain't right. It ain't right to live like this. And ultimately, through all of the maelstrom of this war and violence and brutality, they end up together to live there happily ever after. His friend, though dead in the war, in the conflict, has a child that he will raise, and perhaps he'll have some of his own with Jewel. They will go on to have survived. She was married previously, it is said in the movie, a guy who already died in the course of the war before becoming pregnant with the baby. But they find through all of this mess and this bloodshed, they find their bit of happiness going forward. They escape, not unscathed, but intact enough to settle down and have a life. And that is ultimately the real defiance against tyranny, because it is so hard to get the activity you need to oppose tyranny. People that are obsessed with tyranny will inevitably always have more collective action and power by nature of loving tyranny. But there's that hope that they can't get everywhere. and that you can find your niche. You can have your life. You can have your existence passing through this temporary world while they're busy struggling over who dominates over the rotting corpse of it. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. It's a fun film, a provocatively well done film. If you can find it, check it out. Ride with the Devil.